Well, good evening and welcome back to Wednesday Night Live, coming to you from Pocatello, Idaho in the beautiful Port Neuf Valley, gateway to the great Northwest. And we're glad you could join us tonight. We hope you stick around for the whole program. We have a number of things to cover, as we always do, and hopefully you'll find the information sometimes provocative, certainly informative, and sometimes even uplifting. Let's start off by reminding you about Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, 478 HOPE. These are the folks that I tell you every week, starting at the beginning of my program about. These are the folks who are the antithesis of everything Planned Parenthood. In other words, Compassion and Hope is about life. And you may be one of those who has a hand in saving a life, a young mother, a young baby. Compassion and Hope is a service that is provided basically to young mothers, often unwed mothers, mothers who are not expecting pregnancy, maybe can't even talk to their folks about it because of their youth or their social position. But they can go to Compassion and Hope, and they will find compassion and hope. But Compassion and Hope is not rich. They don't get government subsidies. They don't get millions like Planned Parenthood, and they don't kill babies. They do everything they can to bring them into this world healthy and happy. But they need your help. They operate on a shoestring. So won't you please think about calling Compassion and Hope. See what you can do to help. You can send them money. You can, if you live locally, perhaps bring some infant diapers, baby wipes, anything that you can think of that an infant and a new mother might have need of. And as I've shared with you before, and you may already be aware if you're a young parent yourself, caring for an infant these days is extremely expensive, just diapers and baby wipes alone. So call them at area code 208-478-HOPE. See what you can do to help a mother, to help a baby, and I'm sure you're going to feel good about it. All right, let's get right into our program. Oh, I did have one other reminder. I want to remind you, and I'll just read it from the press release. It's a lot easier. The Bannock County Republican women invite all Republican women to come to a luncheon with Senator Mike Crapo Thursday, that's tomorrow, August 28th at 1 o'clock, 1 in the afternoon, in the Newberry building upstairs, and there is an elevator, 150 North Main in Old Town Pocatello. Senator Crapo has expressed an interest in meeting the women of the Bannock County Republican women and learning of the many activities they support. This is a wonderful opportunity for more Republican women to meet our senator and to see how they can become involved in civic activities through the membership in the Bannock County Republican Women. And folks, it's open to men too. I'm a member. I'm not invited. This is for women here, but I'm not offended by that. The Bannock County Republican Women is an award-winning chapter of the National Republican Women. The Bannock County Republican Women has an annual Constitution Day camp at which hundreds of local children have learned how our country was founded. The Bannock County Republican Women also assists with the annual Constitution Essay Contest within our local schools, and they provide many teaching aids to local schools to help fulfill the federal mandate that Constitution Day, September 17th, be part of all schools' curriculum. The Bannock County Republican Women awards scholarship money to winning essayists. So we look forward to seeing you there. And this is tomorrow at 1 o'clock at the Newberry building. I think it's the second floor. And if you're a Republican woman, I would urge you to go. They're going to have a free light luncheon. And Senator Crapo has specifically asked for this opportunity. As you may have read in the paper, he's touring Southeast Idaho. So I'm sure this is part of his tour. But avail yourselves of the opportunity to meet with our Senator Mike Crapo. We have a number of videos to share with you tonight, but I wanted to share some of the local news or some of the things that we've seen in the Idaho State Journal. And even though this is going to be a little bit out of sequence, I wanted to share, and by golly, didn't I already put it more out of sequence? All right. You remember last week, maybe it was last week or the week before, I read to you an article that was in the Idaho State Journal. It was a letter to the editor by a fellow named Trent Clegg. Trent Clegg is a librarian here in town, and he was pretty upset about George Swenson's take on the non-discrimination ordinance and who it serves and who it does not. And he wrote a less than kind letter. And in the end of the letter, he kind of took a really wide slap at all things California. And of course, being from California myself, I understood how George Swenson probably felt, and others from California who came here for the same reasons we did, and that was because California has turned into a cesspool, and many of us are active here because we don't want to see our little town of Pocatello become another California. That aside, after George Swenson wrote his letter, Trent Clegg wrote his letter, and then he did a little mea culpa on the internet, saying that he was sorry that he'd been so nasty, I'm paraphrasing, and that he wasn't going to do it again. Well, to his credit, he wrote a letter to the Idaho State Journal on the 23rd, so this is just a couple of days ago. I wanted to share that with you because I thought it was kind of stand up for him to do this. He hasn't changed his mind about the non-discrimination ordinance, but he has. Well, let me read the letter to you. It's titled California Transplants, and it was in the August 23rd edition of Letters in the Idaho State Journal. Trent Clegg's, wait a minute, make sure I got the right one. No, I'm sorry, I picked up, well, this is the one George Swenson answered Trent Clegg, and I'm sure hoping I didn't walk off without the one from Trent Clegg, because he wrote a very decent letter and in essence apologized. And I am going to apologize to you. I don't think I have it here. Well, it's very embarrassing, and unfortunately that's one of the things that happens on live TV, and no matter how you prepare, you're bound to find something has been forgotten on your way after you get to the studio and you're on the live camera. Well, let me just simply say that Swenson wrote a letter responding to Trent Clegg's letter, and I'll read that to you, and then I'll explain a little bit about Clegg's letter, California Transplants. Trent Clegg's response to my opinion piece was a wonderful misrepresentation of my motives and intents in writing the column. To give a more complete explanation of why we still need to remove or change this ordinance would take far more than the space allotted on the opinion section of the newspaper. However, I did want to respond to his xenophobic complaint about transplanted Californians. Apparently, Mr. Clegg's tolerance does not extend to outsiders, although I'm sure it does not bother him that outsiders made the tenuous victory over Proposition 1 possible. And if you remember, that was $156,000, and huge organizations from outside of Idaho who made sure that the ordinance wasn't repealed. One thing that many of us transplants have in common is we have all seen a once great state sink into a socialist quagmire where more and more aspects of life there are controlled by an overreaching government, a state which is hemorrhaging businesses, where even illegal aliens are finding it necessary to move away. Laws similar to the gay rights ordinance are common in California, where the gay agenda is much more advanced, to the point where psychologists are legally prohibited from conducting reparative therapy on people with same-sex attraction disorder, even if they want it. Whether Mr. Clegg likes it or not, this hornet's nest is not going away. There are too many of us who have seen the social destruction of the progressive left, whose fruits can be seen in the degradation of the family unit, the violent behavior of kids on psychotropic drugs, the destruction of innocent life, and on and on. It is worth it to make a stand now. Besides, every time we push back, the national leftist organization pour more money into our local economy, so we all win, right? And that was George Swenson's reply to Mr. Clegg. And to my shame, my embarrassment, apparently I forgot or somehow didn't manage to bring the letter from Mr. Clegg. I will work to find that, because I am quite embarrassed, because the letter was well thought out. It seemed to be a genuine if not an apology, certainly an olive branch, and I'm just disappointed. So, Mr. Clegg, I'm sorry, and I realize that there are people who monitor my program for the homosexual community. So I'm sure that Mr. Clegg will learn that I did indeed wish to read his letter, and I will try to find that and get it to you next time. Again, I apologize for that oversight, but let's move forward with tonight's program. In August 3rd, there was an interesting letter in the ISJ in your letters section, and this goes kind of to what we're going to be addressing tonight. We're going to be talking a little bit about this phenomenon that's happening in the Middle East. I say phenomenon guardedly because It is not a phenomenon in the true sense, and yet it seems like it, because it seems like this ISIS, or now it's being called ISL, whatever that means, just kind of sprouted out of nowhere. Well, actually, it's been building and fomenting for about 4 years, I understand. But that being said, we're going to get into a little bit of that. But here is a pretty well thought out letter to the editor that was in August 3rd, and I apologize it is a couple of weeks late, but based upon current number of newspaper columns and letters to the editor, there appears to be a lot of people struggling with moral restraints of a society founded upon Judeo-Christian principles. These principles have their own origin in the Bible's Old Testament, or Mosaic Law, which are the first 5 books of the Bible. These books were by Jewish tradition copied by Moses as they were given to him by God. Because Jesus Christ fulfilled the Mosaic Law as the sacrificial Lamb of God for the atonement of sin, Christians are no longer under obligation to observe these laws and feast. Excuse me. And there are Bible verses in here that are cited. I'm not going to try to get them all in. Nor is there condemnation under the law of those who believe in Jesus Christ. However, for all who do not accept the saving grace of Jesus Christ, they are still under the Mosaic Law. The law is still relevant. In chapter 23 of Leviticus, God has designated 7 specific feasts that Israel were set to observe each year, and God gave Moses a means to accurately to set and keep those dates. The Jews use the monthly cycle of the moon to track time, and the Jewish cycle of the moon is determined to be 29.530594 days per month. The monthly cycle of the moon, as determined by NASA, National Space Agency, in our modern time is about the same, days per month. The difference between these two numbers is 4.7 hours in 3,300 years. The reason that man could have determined the moon's synodical cycle in Moses' time is because the moon's orbit around the earth and the earth's orbit around the sun are not true circle but ellipses that vary continuously, and any reference needed for calculation is always changing, making it impossible to calculate. It is only by using satellites and computers that NASA recently was able to determine the value of the synodical cycle of the moon. The accuracy of the Jewish synodical cycle of the moon verifies that God was the author of these Mosaic laws. For those who struggle with the moral restraints of the Mosaic Law, understand that God is real. God never changes, and God alone is good. The opposite of good is evil, and evil always deceives and destroys. The progressive left have been trying for years to abolish God from America. The more successful they are, the more liberty they destroy. They are replacing liberty with socialist slavery, where the federal government will be able to control every facet of your life, and they will be able to control the government. America, choose God instead, and you will find God's blessings of goodness, prosperity, and liberty. And this was penned by Darrell Doherty of Pocatello. And Darrell, that's well penned, I thought, obviously, or that's why I wanted to share it here. I'll follow another letter having absolutely little to do with what I just read, but equally interesting and informative, and I really appreciated it, was on August 6th. And it's titled, A Beautiful Forgotten Language by Bill Ryan. As one who holds a master's degree in the field of speech, I believe our American language was at its richest in the earliest part of the 20th century. That's when so many people of Jewish heritage were landing in New York and other East Coast cities. One of the great things they brought with them was Yiddish. Those immigrants from Germany or Russia or Hungary were strangers to each other in their native tongue, but they could converse easily in Hebrew and in many cases Yiddish. Entertainment soon popped up in the Yiddish theater with music and dancers and comedy. Since Yiddish was spoken in mostly Jewish homes, many scenes were reenacted there. But English gradually replaced Yiddish as Jews became more Americanized, and each generation was exposed to less of it, maybe a word or a phrase here and there. Abby's Irish Rose, a play about a happy marriage of an Irish Catholic girl and a Jewish boy, ran for years on Broadway with a weekly radio show on NBC beginning in 1942. The Goldbergs was another in which Yiddish abounded. Gentiles thought it was funny, but many Jews may have found it an embarrassment. The Guiding Light dramatized stories from the Old Testament. And it's funny, I remember these stories when I was a boy in Chicago, living with my grandparents. My grandmother would tune in on these programs while she was doing her ironing and other domestic chores, and so I actually heard many of these on the radio as a boy, and I remember them. One of the denizens of Allen's Alley on the Fred Allen radio show was Mrs. Pansy Nosbaum, a heavily accented Jewish lady who often resorted to Yiddish. Mr. Kitzel, the hot dog vendor on the Jack Benny show, created the catchphrase, pickle in the middle and mustard on the top, to Benny's delight. Jewish comedians like Shecky Green and Jackie Mason are always funny, but today's heavy hitters like Woody Allen and Larry David depend more on humorous situations than talk. Mel Brooks, also known as Melvin Kaminsky, was obviously exposed to Yiddish as a kid and uses it in his movies. Mel admits that when in Blazing Saddles, he is a Native American chief confronting a black family in a covered wagon. He sprouts off Yiddish gibberish, then says with wonder, "They darker than us," and lets them go on. Although Judge Judy may drop a Y-bomb by calling some obvious jerk a schlemiel, a simpleton, you might consider Yiddish almost as dead as Latin today, and it's a shame. That's said by a confirmed goy, which is another term for Gentile. Check out The Joys of Yiddish, or Hooray for Yiddish, by Leo Roston, or get it on Alibris or Amazon. And it says Pocatello native Bill Ryan is retired UPI editor and was earlier with Idaho State. He lives in the Dallas suburb of Richardson, Texas, and can be reached at Ryan, that's WRYAN, 1807 at AOL.com. And so having been raised with quite a bit of Yiddish in my family, I found that an interesting commentary. All right. Let's fast forward. We're going to get to some video here in a minute, but we have to kind of set the stage. One more letter from the letter section, a letter to the editor, and this is August 21st, very short. It's titled Immigrant Kids. The letter from Patricia Estep, July 31st, is a silly outrage. Where does she get the nonsense that pro-lifers don't care about the human waves coming across the southern border? We're already taking in the rest of the world. How many border children are lodged in her home? She says, quote, children who have landed on the planet, regardless of where they came from, need and deserve to be taken care of. Huh? She can say that and then turn around and see nothing wrong with the daily thousands who get sucked into abortion sinks. Then she has the gall to say that pro-lifers have a double standard. The entire pro-choice attitude is a huge double standard. And that's by Terry Jacobson of Pocatello. And huzzah and hurrah to you, Terry Jacobson. I couldn't agree more. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about ISIS. And this ISIS thing is, well, outside of the shooting in Ferguson, Missouri, it's probably the biggest thing we have to talk about. And it's interesting how these things seem to come in waves and in groups so that one detracts from another. And I'm sure that Mr. Obama was, forgive the phraseology, he was probably glad to see the Ferguson incident take some of the heat off of him, because while the world is burning because of ISIS, he's out playing golf. Not one round, not two rounds, not three rounds, but 6 or 10 rounds of golf, where he was able to spare 2 minutes to come in and talk about something important, and he was able to spare it only because somebody in his staff brought him a jacket to put on, no tie, open collar. He came in and did his tap dance at the podium. Of course, he has to use even in his direst times, he still has to use his prompters to speak. The man is almost incapable of coherent speech without those. Gave a whole big 2 minutes to one of the most dire situations on earth, and then he quickly danced off to another round of golf. Now he's on his way to another fundraiser. This is the fundraisingest, golfingest guy ever, and neither sleet nor rain nor snow nor dead of night will keep him from his golf and his vacations and from his fundraisers to help get Democrats elected. Like we need more Democrats. Like we need more Republicans with a big R. All right, so this is August 23rd. Sending ISIS to early grave is a great idea. It would be tough to think of another group of ne'er-do-wells that was more begging for its own destruction than Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Known as ISIS, this group of hardcore Islamic extremists have taken control of much of Iraq, and most recently chopped the head off an American journalist they had kidnapped in Syria. In a video released this week, members of ISIS decapitated American freelance photographer James Wright Foley. By the way, he's also a devout Christian. And threatened to do the same to another kidnapped American journalist, Stephen Joel Sotloff. And I think Stephen Joel is the fellow that was just released, I'm not sure, who also appeared on camera pleading with President Obama to stop using air power to bomb ISIS forces. Apparently, if American military jets continue the airstrikes, Sotloff will also be executed. For those who have been following ISIS's behavior during its invasion of Iraq, the beheading of a kidnapped American journalist comes as no surprise. Do a Google search of ISIS atrocities, and here's what you'll find. ISIS atrocities against Yazidis includes mass graves, horrific new photos of ISIS atrocities, Yazidi women raped by ISIS jumped to death, ISIS fighters abduct, plan to execute 63 members of an Iraqi family, lined up and executed, their severed heads put on display. Militant group asked Yazidi women to come take her husband's head. The Yazidis are a Kurdish-speaking minority in Iraq with a religion that's very similar to Islam, but not enough to keep ISIS terrorists from launching a genocidal campaign against them. And you might be interested, if you don't already know this, ISIS plays no favorites. ISIS is the culmination of Islam. These are not extremists. They are following the Quran, the Islamic text, to the word. And if you read some of these books I've shared with you, and I will share them again with you, you will find out that Islam has not been hijacked. ISIS is actually fulfilling Islam, while the so-called moderate Muslims are ignoring parts of Islam, and according to Islamic tradition, to their peril. Anyway, I digress. Actually, it seems that most Muslims encountered by ISIS are not Muslim enough and meet a similarly brutal end. If you're an Iraqi Christian and happen to encounter ISIS forces, our advice is to get away fast. Otherwise, you're likely to lose your head, literally. One would probably have to go back to the Waffen-SS behavior during World War II to find another military organization with a consistently horrific and inhumane record as ISIS. Well, I would add to that the Japanese, when they raped China, the rape of Nanking. The Japanese, there are things, I have a book at home that my wife found on eBay. The most shocking thing I've ever read about the Japanese atrocities, and almost nobody in Japan was held accountable. In fact, many of them, just like the Germans, went on to successful careers after the war. For any American worried about the use of U.S. air power to rid the world of ISIS, rest assured that sending those bloodthirsty jihadists to the hereafter is a terrific idea. Let's do it sooner rather than later. President Obama is leery about again committing U.S. ground forces to Iraq, and we understand his caution. But the president should not hesitate to commit as many of our special operations forces as necessary to call in as many airstrikes as necessary to rid the planet of ISIS. It might be cliched to refer to ISIS as evil. That term seems to get thrown about a lot these days. But when it comes to this 10,000 strong army of very bad people, evil is fitting. Spend a couple of minutes doing research on them and you'll come to that conclusion. Let's hope that Iraqi and Kurdish forces, with lots of help from the U.S., send ISIS to an early grave. Trust us when we say the world will definitely be a better place. And then the footnote is a group so evil that even the ISJ can show a spine. Perhaps O'Donnell should have read this before he attacked me last Sunday. And if you read last Sunday's Idaho State Journal, Mike O'Donnell, perhaps he doesn't feel like he's getting enough readership these days, so he pulled out his old trump card, and that is to let's throw a few more stones at Lillig and see if we can get some hate going. I'm sure to his dismay it hasn't worked that way. As a matter of fact, his column had very few comments, none of them favorable to him. If you go to the Idaho State Journal blog site, once these articles are in the can to be published, they're usually put up on the blog site so that people such as you can comment on them. And Mr. O'Donnell's latest attack on me didn't, well, it kind of fizzled in the can. So good for you, Mike. All you do is increase my ratings. All right, October 21st, we had the budget hearings. And that was very interesting for a number of reasons. The budget is always interesting. If you looked into today's Idaho State Journal, and I hope you got it for free at the university instead of paying good money for it, unless you're already like me, a subscriber, And as I've told you before, I subscribe because I have to if I'm going to tell you about the things that, and make my commentary. They're the gift that just keeps giving. At any rate, this is from the August 21st Idaho State Journal by Mike himself, Michael H. O'Donnell. To protest what they feel is a city budget that has outstripped the tax base. Oh, I digressed from myself. On the back page of today's Idaho State Journal was a very thin breakdown of the budget. And it's interesting to look at. You may want to, I think you can go online. I didn't try to go online today, but you might go online and look it up. I remember when Mr. Swindell was still the CFO or whatever his title was, I went to him and asked for the complete budget. And he was reluctant to give me that because the budget that we see published it's just superficial. It really doesn't give you the dollars and cents and pennies where the things actually go. As a public information thing, you should be able to go to the city council or city hall and ask for the actual budget. If you want to pay for it, that's fine. They wanted to charge me, I think it was $44 for a copy of it. However, I did obtain a thumb drive of the thing, and I'm telling you, without some sort of a map, it was impossible. It was incoherent to try to figure out the shell game that is played with our funds to fund this, that, and the other thing. Part of that shell game came back to haunt the city council, with the mayor, of course, being the chief executive. He gets the blame for it. They got caught with their hands in the cookie jar, as you may recall, to the tune of, I think it was $2.2 million, where they were taking money from the water fund, or water purification, sanitation, whatever it is, the water fund, putting it into the general fund, which is a no-no. And the Builders Association took them in task, won in court, took a while, but they won. The city now has to repay that money. And so they're really doing some hacking and cutting in the city budget, and or they're trying to. And yet, in order to make ends meet, the city council just put a 6% increase on our property taxes, so they can cover for the shell game once again at our expense. But again, I digress from my own information. So to protest what they feel is a city budget that has outstripped the tax base, Pocatello City Councilman Craig Cooper and Michael Orr voted against the annual appropriations budget for 2015. The city has proposed and passed a budget of $105.5 million for the coming fiscal year, which begins October 1st. Quote, "I'm not just comfortable with the budget," Cooper said. It's the largest increase in property tax levy assessment I've seen. We need to make some decisions on where to cut. The 2015 fiscal year budget calls for an increase in city property taxes of about 6% compared with 2014. The levy for every $100,000 of taxable value will go up from $993.93 to $1,053.50. So that's about a $60 increase per $100,000. So that's going to be a sizable increase. Cooper said Pocatello citizens have to decide if they're happy with the tax rate or look at deciding what's essential. Our tax growth is completely inverse to our city growth, said Councilman Orr. It's unsustainable. If there's anybody on the city council who I trust with budget issues, is Michael Orr. Even though he's the newest city councilman, he is a retired businessman, quite successful in his own right, and he understands these things, and he's not easily hoodwinked, even by the tap dance and the three-card Monte done by the outgoing CFO. The 2015 budget did pass with City Council members Jim Johnston. Jim has no problem passing big budgets. Steve Brown, good old Steve, always jumps in there to... I think Steve and perhaps Jim are busy working on their next election now, trying to curry favor with the liberal progressives. And of course, one way to curry favor in this town is to raise the taxes to support the school district, the university, and of course the city's budget. So members Jim Johnston, Steve Brown, Eva Nye, and Gary Moore voting in favor of adopting the budget. It was a protest, Cooper and Orr said about their votes. We need to get more focused on bringing new businesses into the city or make some tough decisions, Orr said. We're not setting aside any money for a rainy day. There's no reserves anywhere, and that should be a concern to all of us. And it goes on and tells where all the money went. You may want to look that up. I suggest you go online, and if you can't find it online, go to City Hall and Tell them you'd like to have a copy of the city's budget, and if you have to do a Freedom of Information Act request, then do it. Do a FOIA. Tell them you don't want the superficial little 4-page magazine that comes out. Tell them you want the real deal that has all of the who gets paid what, and where the money is spent, and who buys from whom, and so on. This may last week and the week before, I commended to you a new book. I'm about halfway through it now. I haven't got through as quickly as I wanted to because, well, I have other reading to do, but I've shared this with you. I commend it to you once again by Dr. Stephen Kirby. And I have to correct myself. Stephen Kirby's PhD is in foreign affairs with an emphasis on the Soviet Union. So I think I said he was something else, but whatever it is. This is the third book by Dr. Kirby. And it's very interesting in this book. I was reading today, for instance, and I've read this before, but he has an interesting way of putting it. There's only one way, one sure way, that a Muslim can get to Muslim heaven, the Islamic heaven, whatever it is. The only sure way for a Muslim to get there is to die in jihad. In other words, in war. That's the only sure way. And then in the Quran and in the surahs and the hadith or wherever all the other things are, then it is very clear that if you die in jihad in behalf of Islam, you go right to heaven. You get your 72 virgins. They fail to tell you that they're all nuns and they're in midlife crisis, and it ain't going to be as fun as you think. But that aside, so it's very interesting in here. I got a thing on the internet, and it kind of coincided with this because I thought, how can these people be so willing to do that? Now we've seen this kind of fanaticism before. This is not new. We saw the fanaticism of the SS, the Waffen SS, for the Aryan nation, the Aryan race. We saw this with the Japanese soldiers who thought of defeat, and as Americans when they surrendered, or the British, they were often beheaded. In fact, they were even often cannibalized, and there are lots of books that tell you about this by some of the Japanese officers. And we know about the banzai charges and the fanaticism of the Japanese during the Second War. The banana wars in the Philippines, the .45 pistol was invented basically because a .38 would not stop the Filipino guerrillas, who would wrap themselves in hemp and get all coked up, and you'd shoot them with .38s and nothing happened. The .45 would knock them down. So we've seen this kind of fanaticism before, but we've never seen it on such a grand scale. So when you look at these ISIS people, they're absolutely dedicated to jihad because that's their sure way of heaven. Now, if you don't die in jihad, if you're unfortunate enough to slip in your bathtub or die in an auto accident or choke on a chicken while you're having dinner, you may or may not go to Islam heaven because apparently Allah is perfidious, and he can be somewhat cavalier, and he may or may not like you. You may have done enough good stuff and you may not have. So, but if you die in jihad, which is every Muslim warrior's desire, that's why they are so fanatical. So now I was reading, and here's this is from the book Islam According to Muhammad, Not Your Neighbor, and it says, and they're talking to the marathon mother, the Boston Marathon mother, and she was talking about how proud she was of her son dying because in her eyes he died in jihad. Muhammad was asked when fighting in the cause of what fighting in the cause of Allah meant, and he replied, "He who fights that Allah's word, such as Allah's religion of Islamic monotheism, should be superior, fights in Allah's cause." And the only guaranteed way for a Muslim to get into paradise, this is the only guaranteed way, is to die as a jihadist, a martyr fighting in the cause of Allah. This is a promise to Muslims made in chapter 9, verse 111 of the Quran, quoting. And this is, of course, translated into English, so it'll lose a little of the flavor of it in Arabic. Verily, Allah has purchased of the believers their lives and their properties for the price that theirs shall be paradise. They fight in Allah's cause, so they kill others and are killed. It is a promise in truth which is binding on him, and him being capitalized, in the Torah, and the Injil, the Gospel, and the Quran. The word Quran means recital, to recite. And when you read in Quran, you're reading the recitation by Muhammad of what he says that Allah told him. He was inspired by Allah. And who is truer to his covenant than Allah? Then rejoice in the bargain which you have concluded. That is the supreme success. So dying in jihad on behalf of Allah, on behalf of Islam, is your guaranteed ticket to paradise. So, and this kind of begs a question, and this came up on the internet, and I share this with you. Keep in mind, you have to study it to understand there are some differences. So-called moderate Muslims and the jihadists and the fanatics, the ISIS fanatics, I tell you, they are fulfilling Islam. They are not loose cannon crazies. They are the truest sense of the fundamentalist who are fulfilling Islam as it is written. And you will have all kinds of defenders of Islam who are going to say, well, that's not true, this, and the only thing that in Islam and in the Quran, the last verse containing that is talking about any particular subject, the most recent verse, and they're not allowed to make changes. Changing anything of Allah is a sure way to hell. But if there is a change that was made by Muhammad, then that is the most current, is always the current one. So if you read in the Quran that you have to kill the infidel in order to go to heaven, that's true unless there has been a revelation by Muhammad. He's the only one allowed to reveal. There had to be a revelation by Muhammad that said something contrary to that, and there is no revelation contrary to you have to kill an infidel to go to Muslim heaven. So that is a primary consideration. All right, so here's the thing that it begs the question. Can a good Muslim be a good American? Now, I realize we have, right in our community, we have several Muslims who have a high profile and they are well thought of and they do good things. This is not an indictment of them. It's not even, it's not in any way, shape, or form meant to be against them. This is a question. It's an academic question. It may even seem rhetorical, but it is certainly a worthwhile question. Can a good Muslim, in other words, a fundamentalist who is following the Quran to the letter, be a good American? That question was forwarded to a person that worked in Saudi Arabia for 20 years. The following is his forwarded reply. Theologically, no, because his allegiance is to Allah. Do not mistake Allah with the Western version of God. The word God is used for Westerners so that you will know who they're talking about. But believe me, the Muslim is not talking about the Western God, whether it's the triune God or whoever you observe as a deity. It is Allah, and much, much different. Theologically, no, because his allegiance is to Allah. Religiously, no, because no other religion is accepted by his Allah except Islam. And if you are a Muslim, you are not allowed to even talk about another religion, technically. Scripturally, no, because his allegiance is to the 5 pillars of Islam in the Quran. Geographically, no, because his allegiance is to Mecca, to which he turns in prayer 5 times a day. Socially, no, because his allegiance to Islam forbids him to make friends with Christians or Jews. So if you have a Muslim friend, this is not an indictment of your friend, but it is saying basically that your friend, if he befriends you, he's doing one of 2 things under Islamic law. He's either lying to you, which the Quran allows him to do for whatever reason, or he's disobeying the Quran. Either way, it can be a problem. Politically, no, because he must submit to the mullah, the spiritual leaders, who teach annihilation of Israel and destruction of America, the so-called Great Satan. Domestically, no, because he is instructed to marry 4 women and beat and scourge his wife when she disobeys him. That's in 434 of Quran. Intellectually, no, because he cannot accept the American Constitution since it is based on biblical principles and he believes the Bible to be corrupt. Philosophically, no, because Islam, Muhammad, and the Quran do not allow freedom of religion and expression. Democracy and Islam cannot coexist. Every Muslim government is either dictatorial or autocratic. Spiritually, no, because when we declare one nation under God, the Christian's God is loving and kind, while Allah is never referred to as Heavenly Father, nor is he ever called love in the Quran's 99 excellent names. And regarding the Islamic path to heaven, as I said, the only certain way to Muslim heaven is by dying as a martyr in jihad against infidels. Dying in any other way, basically, is a crapshoot. You may or may not get to Islamic heaven. All right, I wanted to touch on something else because we only have about 9 minutes if this clock is correct. And there are a number of things I had hoped to touch on, but I wanted to go to this piece. This is a very interesting thing. The other big thing on television right now, of course, is the police officer shooting this 18-year-old black child, this youth in Ferguson, Missouri. Now, I want to remind you, in case you have overlooked it, that he was 18 years old. There are a lot of Vietnam veterans who were 18 when they were in country. 18 years is legally an adult. So walking down the street and then thumbing your nose at the law is not an adult attitude, and it's the kind that obviously causes problems. Strong-arming a market owner for a handful of cigars is not an adult thing to do. I had some photos that came up on the internet, and I can't find them again. It shows this young male African-American, apparently a saint in Ferguson now, who he and his partner, the guy who swore up and down that he saw him shot in the back, they're in different poses, giving the third finger to everybody who's looking at the photograph. And in one of those pictures, young Mr. Brown is dressed down in his blood colors, the blood red shirt and the blood tennis shoes. So there's more to him than meets the eye. But here's a very interesting thing. This was two things, and I don't know if we're going to have time to catch them both or not. Josh, can we go to number 8, please? I have to give him a minute to wind that up because I skipped over a whole lot of stuff to get to that. And we're going to address a little bit about Ferguson, Missouri. Okay, please watch this.
Hey everyone, it's Jonathan. I just want to get straight to the point about this Michael Brown incident. Let me tell you something, and I said this before. What we're doing out here is not helping. Us rioting, looting, burning down donut shops and stores and everything else, liquor store, Shanae's hair salon for the extensions, this is not helping. Us acting a fool out here because we pissed off at the police is not helping. I said this before and I said it again. Change is not going to come until we change it. You understand what I'm saying? This is not helping. Change isn't going to come until we change it. All we know how to do is march and riot and loot. This is not helping. What you guys are out here doing is not helping, and I hate to say this, but I'm going to tell you what you need to hear imposing to what you want to hear. All we know how to do is blame the police and white folks for our actions. That's all we know how to do is blame police and white folks. They mistreating us. They beating on us. Oh, slavery still exists. Oh, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. I'm not going to tell you we going to march, we going to do this, we going to do that. I'm going to tell you, damn it, let's change. Let's change as black people. When is this going to stop? When? How are our children supposed to grow up when we out here acting a stone fool? How are our kids supposed to grow up and we out here acting stupid? How? How? Even the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 2 verse 3, God said, we have toiled this mountain long enough. We have toiled this mountain long enough. 40 plus years they spent in the wilderness. It's been over 50 years since we sang that song, We Shall Overcome. Hell, when are we gonna overcome? When? That was 50 plus years ago, and all we doing is going around in circles. Going around in circles. You activists out there, you civil rights leaders, all of a sudden Black Panthers, NAACP come out the woodworks. They just came out of nowhere. We gonna want justice. We want justice. No justice, no peace. That's all you see. No justice, no peace. Shut up. When there was 60 plus shootings in Chicago a few weeks back, where were you? Nowhere to be found. A few weeks later, it was 47 drive-bys in one weekend. Where were you? Nowhere to be found. When Lil Ray kills Little Lukey, where were you? Nowhere to be found. Okay, when them little girl was shot when she was riding her tricycle in the front yard and stray bullets hit her, where were you? Nowhere to be found. Police beat up on a black man. Oh, slavery still exists. Slavery still exists. Oh, shut up. Because I hate to say this, and I know this is going to piss a lot of people off. All the incidents I seen, all the brothers was resisting arrest and causing trouble. Okay? Hate to tell the truth. Hate to tell the truth. Because I want to debunk that myth as far as being young and black and mistreated. I'm young, black, I drive a brand new BMW and live in the valley. How many encounters have I had with the police? Many. How many times has it got out of control? None. 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 So I want to debunk that myth about us getting mistreated and slavery. Oh, all they know how to do is beat on the black man. Nonsense. Nonsense. Because I had many encounters with the police and I became good friends with them. Tell me how come I could live that life and you can't? Tell me. It's time for us to change as black people. Marching ain't cutting it. All you civil rights leaders, all you jokers out there telling us, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to change. The book of Deuteronomy, I said again, chapter 2, verse 3, God said, we have tore up this mountain long enough, go northeast. It's time for us to change. Change as black people. And I'm not talking about that Obama change, because we still waiting for that change. That's a whole nother video, but we still waiting on that. That silly joker ain't said nothing about none of this. It's time for us to change. You civil rights leaders, it's time for you to hear from God and get a revelation. We need to change our sense of direction. Jesus said the blind can't lead the blind because they both gonna fall in the ditch. Matthew 15:15, don't get it twisted. Stop burning down your communities and where you live because you mad at the police. Clean up your own neighborhoods and then they'll clean up theirs. Starts with you first. I said that from jump. Reverend Al Sharpton, all you leaders out there, NAACP, let's get it together. Let's get it together because this is embarrassing. The whole country is watching us act like Planets of the Apes Part 3. Okay, where's Hollywood when you need it? I'm going to be honest and give you the cold facts. Where's Hollywood when you need it? Because there's Planet of the Apes going on right now. Let's get it together, black folks. Let's change our ways. Until this all comes forward, we need to chill and relax. Okay, out here acting stupid and acting like Curious George on Red Bulls ain't helping. Ain't helping. I don't support that. I don't support that. My kid looking at TV like, what's going on over there? What in the world? A girl walking down the street with TVs and her underwear on. What is that? It's embarrassing as black people. Let's stop marching and let's just change. Okay, that we shall overcome nonsense. Let's get it together. I'm still waiting for us to overcome. Okay, now it's 50 plus years ago. Round and round in circles ain't working anymore. God bless you all. Keep moving forward as a nation, as a people.
That's the Reverend Jonathan Gentry. And his extreme presentation there is deliberate. He's preaching to the young black people. He's in Los Angeles. He lives in the Valley. The Valley is considered in many parts of it upscale. He doesn't live in Compton. But he obviously has a very strong opinion and message. We're going to talk about it a little bit more next week. In the meantime, God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you found some things in here enlightening and uplifting. And until next week at this time, pray for Israel, pray for our nation, pray for our country. God bless you. We'll see you next week. Good.